not a lot of Australians want to do that work. And, you know, people do that work because they're so desperate to stay in this country. But when you're expected to pay to work so hard to get paid absolutely pennies, and then they charge you extortionate money for accommodation just on top of that.
This week on Dirty Linen, we have been heading to the regions to talk to people about rural labour, working on farms, picking fruit, picking veg, getting produce to the tables of Australians. Today we're going to talk to somebody who has been on a working holiday visa, is one of the nationals that we are now sadly lacking in regional Australia. There aren't enough people to pick our fruit because the working holiday visa holders, the backpackers, are simply not around. Her name is Georgina Dent. She is an extremely talented young chef, and Australia just needs to hang on to her. Welcome to Dirty Linen, Georgie. It's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So last time we spoke, it was in the depths of winter. We were talking about your visa status and the job that you had at Anchovy restaurant in Melbourne's Richmond. They were desperate to sponsor you, to have you as a permanent member of their staff, because they could see how much you were going to bring to their business. And basically, they invested a complete government grant that they were given at the very start of the pandemic by the Victorian government. That $10,000 grant went basically to keeping you in the country. How have things panned out since then? Has there been any updates on your sponsorship and your role at Anchovy?
No updates on the visa, but I think there is a massive backlog at the minute with like visas going through. So who knows? They said up to 6 months, but it's been longer than 6 months now. So I could be waiting up to 2 years. But yeah, I was just super fortunate to get that sponsorship like from Anchovy, especially like 2 months just before my visa was going to end as well. So very lucky, and obviously I'm so happy to still be here and then under the leadership of T and JY.
Yeah. So at the moment, that would mean that you're on a bridging visa. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So sort of in a bit of a limbo land, but I think they will have dotted the I's and crossed the T's, and the wheels will hopefully grind, and eventually you'll have your sponsorship and be on the pathway to permanent residency. I think one of the things that JY&T at Anchovy were so impressed with about you was your varied experience and all the different things that you've done as a chef. And I think also you've got a really clear vision and ambition, don't you? Like, you just love learning, love cooking. Tell us a little bit about yourself as a cook.
So since I think I was the age of 11, I kind of knew that I wanted to cook from both of my parents being chefs. I think that really like came on to me, and just from such a young age, really wanting to know what I wanted to do, just done me well. And then obviously working back in the UK and then coming here. I've never really Vietnamese is a totally new cuisine for me, so it's actually like almost like learning to cook again, which is actually like really exciting. And sometimes in cooking you need something to refresh yourself, and this is just like a new beginning for me. So I'm pretty excited, and it's just a beginning for me at Anchovy, as I've got a 4-year sponsorship. So I'm looking forward to what's to come in the future.
Tell us about you and butchery, because I know that getting in whole animals is such a big part of what Anchovy does. And one of the reasons that they found it hard to find the sort of employee that they needed locally, they just didn't have people applying that had those skills to actually break down an animal. How come you've got those skills?
I think it's not the skills a lot of chefs have nowadays, because there's actually not a wide range of restaurants that get in whole animals, or maybe it's not the fact that they can't get them in the space, and sometimes maybe the money it costs, or like you said, people don't have the skills to break down whole animals. But actually started when I was working in the UK. So I was working at restaurant Sat Baines, and I think I spent just about over a year and a half there, maybe like a year and 9 months. And I felt like I maybe needed a little bit of a break from the kitchen. Just not almost like a break, but just to do something new, and maybe like just work a few less hours, and just do something that's going to benefit myself, but not like just give up. So I thought, so there's a butcher's in Cornwall called Philip Warren's, and I just emailed them out of chance. I didn't honestly think that they would say yes. And then they were like, yeah, Georgina, we would love to have you. So yeah, I just did like a 4 month stint at Butcher's in Cornwall, which was so amazing. It was so much fun. I mean, it was freezing in there. It was like a 5 degree work area, just working in a big fridge with 50 men. So sometimes it was challenging, but it was such a good experience that I'm so glad I got to have.
Okay, well, let's talk about another experience that you got to have, and that's your your time in the regions of Australia. So, just do you want to just explain to us? You came here as on a working holiday visa. Can you just explain to us the structure of that visa and the obligations that fall upon you if you want to extend it?
So I came here on a working holiday visa, which you get granted for 1 year, and you're only allowed to work at one job for 6 months. And then to stay an extra year, you have to complete 3 months or 88 days of regional farm work. So I got to the end of my time at the time I was working at the press club, and I knew I had like 4 or 5 months to get my farm work done because they say you should always leave yourself extra time. So yeah, I applied for so many jobs doing regional work, and then I managed to get a place up in Bundaberg picking lemons and mandarins.
So tell us about that. I mean, how did you go into that work? I mean, obviously you don't mind putting yourself up for new experiences, but what was your sort of attitude as you were applying for jobs and as you were heading up to Bundaberg?
Honestly, to be honest, I'd been offered sponsorship at my first job, Matilda, but I turned it down because I wanted to experience farm work. I think everyone was a little bit shocked, but it was just something that I really wanted to do because there was so many things said about farm work. So I think I was just going in with an attitude that I was going into the totally unknown, you know. For the first time since starting work when I was 16, I was doing something I had no idea about, which was probably like a
Mm.
little bit scary and a little bit daunting, but I mean, how do you think how hard can picking fruit be? But then you do hear stories, so
So tell us what it was like. What happened when you got up to Bundaberg?
um,
Set the scene for us.
oh my god, honestly, yeah. So I got a I got to Bundaberg, and I I've been traveling, but I've never stayed in a hostel before. So we get to Bundaberg and we get to the hostel, and I was like, wait, are we in the right place? And I look around, like, it's bearing in mind this place we had to pay $220 a week for accommodation. So shared bathroom. There was only like 5 toilets and showers. I think up to 100 people can live there.
Whoa.
And then there was no air conditioning, and it was boiling hot. It was like 35 degrees. And I think I just had a little cry, to be honest. I just sat in the room and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. So I was like, look, let's just like stick it out for this week. And then if this is just so unimaginable that you don't think we can do it, like, let's leave. So, God, it was so hard. And then, yeah, the next day, I think we just started work. We had to crack on. And then I think once you start to meet people, it does get all right. But I mean, the work never gets any easier.
But describe the work to us and also what the mode of payment was. Like, how are you paid?
Right. So the mode of paid is you only get paid for what you pick. So it's piece rate. So which I think the bin. So we were picking lemons and mandarins on like 150-acre farm. It was absolutely massive, and I think in total there was about 300 pickers. So there was so many of us. And I think in those 300 pickers there was only 4 Australian people that I'd seen come through. Yeah, it was
Interesting.
crazy.
Yeah.
And so the bins are like 500 kilos. So you have to load your bin with 500 kilos of like lemons or mandarins. And it's $180 for a bin of lemons. And Normally you pick in twos because it's faster. You can pick on your own, but I think to start with, it's probably best not to pick on your own.
But I just can't. Okay, 500 kilos sounds like a lot. So what are you actually carrying around with you? Are you carrying a bag, or like what's the actual setup?
So you're carrying a brown bag around your neck that also gets tied around your waist. And then and then also you're carrying this huge, probably 12, 15-foot ladder that's so heavy. And then so when you get to a tree, you pick all of the way you're like shown, or the fastest way is probably someone starts picking at the bottom while someone is in the top of the tree. So your ladder has two legs at the front and then one big like pole at the back that you have to kind of throw and jab it into the tree. And then you climb up the ladder, pick your lemons with a little snipper, but there's only a certain way you can pick the lemons because these lemons are like the most precious thing in the world to these farmers, you know. So and you're wearing gloves. It's 35 degrees. You're absolutely boiling hot, and then you get a little ring size to pick the lemons, and you can't, if the lemon falls through the ring, it just goes on the floor. Too small, just goes on the floor. And then you pick, and then you have to put them in your bag gently, cause so you don't break the skin. And if the bin smells of lemons, that means you've been too rough for the lemons and you're not going to get paid for it.
So how many kilos would the bag that you're carrying hold?
I mean, it depends how many you want to like really throw in. So I'd probably say you could probably fit about maybe 10, 15 kilo in the bag. It's quite a lot of lemon.
Yeah. So you're up and down ladders walking back to the bin. And is it like each person has one of those 500 kilo bins, or you share it with your partner or whatever? Is that how it works?
Yeah, yeah, like you choose someone to buddy up with, and yeah, that's how it usually works. Yeah, and then you just go like you go as fast as you can to like fill up how many bins you can on a day.
And how many hours a day would you be up there?
So we started at 6 a.m. and we came back at like 5. We finished at 5. Yeah, it's a big day.
And would they feed you?
No, you have to bring your own lunch and water.
Okay. And so what's the sort of standard, like what did you earn in a day? How much of your bin did you manage to fill?
Honestly, I think it kind of depended on my mood, which probably sounds actually really bad. I probably tried to pick 3 bins a day, which is like 1.5 each.
Whoa,
But there was,
that's a lot.
uh, yeah, but you got to think there's so much time to do it, and you want to get paid, so you kind of. I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. There was some days where I think I just sat under the tree and I was like, not today. And we'd have times. So if it's raining, we're not allowed to pick lemons. So sometimes, if it was like going to be really bad weather in the night, and then in the morning they would just cancel our work. So that means we also don't get paid. And then sometimes we would go to the farm and it would start raining, and then we would have to stop picking. Everyone stop picking, wait under the trees until it stopped raining, and then wait for the lemons to dry, and then start picking again. So sometimes if it's like raining, and you just sometimes can't guarantee the weather, you know. So that was such a nightmare.
And how were your 88 days counted? Like if you picked one lemon a day, was that counted as a day, or was there some sort of, you had to get a certain number of hours for it to count as one of your 88 days?
I think with piece rate they don't know how many hours you've worked, or it doesn't matter how many hours you've worked, because if you're still going in and you've just picked half a bin, a quarter of a bin, it still classes as a day of work.
Yeah. So, and Georgina, you had a health situation that you were dealing with in amongst all this, didn't you?
Oh yeah. Oh, what a nightmare. I actually did, yeah. My appendix burst, I think, just 2 months before.
So, how did that affect your time up in Bundaberg?
I think for me, I was just pretty cautious about how much I was lifting because I was advised by the doctors after my surgery not to do any because I couldn't walk for a month after, so it was quite a long recovery. And then I wasn't allowed to do any heavy lifting for a few months, but I had no choice to do my farm work, otherwise I would have had to go home, and I just really did not want to go home. So I thought pursuing the farm work was the best idea.
So not really aligned with your doctor's advice. No heavy lifting. Oh, I'll just climb up and down some trees for 88 days and pick some lemons. That sounds like a good thing to do.
I know it probably wasn't the best decision.
Was it scary? Like if I think about myself, like aiming a spike at a tree and climbing up a ladder and getting with a heavy bag around my neck and picking some lemons, I feel like I'm going to be scared. How did you like cope with that sort of, yeah, being up above the ground on a ladder and, a, a big weight to carry around?
I think it does take a little while to get used to it, actually. I mean, you go in the first day you're there, that you go in for a practice. Like, I think they just give you one tree to practice on. You put the ladder in, show them you can walk up, and then you walk back down, and then they're like, right, okay, you're good to pick lemons. And
Okay.
that's how it, and that's the health and safety training. And they said, if you see a snake, just scream, and we'll come on over. So that was pretty rogue, but
So did you feel like this was just another experience that you could chalk down in the big adventure of your life, or did you feel or did you feel like you were being exploited?
honestly, I'm actually pretty disappointed on. I don't really know who to blame, but I'm pretty disappointed in how they let farm work run, considering now that they're so in the shit. So in the shit for workers because basically, we've all gone home because there's no support in this country whatsoever for actually the people that are quite important here and do. And I'm not being funny, but I don't think not a lot of Australians want to do that work. And people do that work because they're so desperate to stay in this country. But when you're expected to pay to work so hard to get paid absolutely pennies, and then they charge you extortionate money for accommodation just on top of that. Yeah, it's actually quite upsetting.
It is because I mean it's like you're being held hostage by your visa conditions, and you felt like you had no choice because you wanted to stay here. You felt like you had no choice but to put your health at risk against doctor's advice to go and lift heavy things, and it doesn't sound like you were given um, the right impression of what the conditions were going to be or what the work was going to be like. And I mean, you speak English, like you've got that advantage. I imagine for people whose first language isn't English, that there'd be the challenges would just be amplified.
Yeah, I think honestly, no one really prepares you for actually like how hard it's gonna be, and it's not really mentally draining, but it's so physically draining. And honestly, the work is so hard. Like, not only do you have to, like, you're spending so much money on food because this is taking so much energy, so you're eating so much food. And then also, like, I think there was some days it reached 40 degrees, and I was just like, oh my god, like, this is just so hot. Like, how can I carry on? But I mean, you've got to pay for accommodation at the end of the day, and no one's just gonna be like, "Oh, don't worry about paying rent this week because you couldn't pick enough lemons."
So, and what about the food situation? Like you said, you've got to bring your own lunch. Did you also have to make your own dinner? And what options were there for purchasing food? I mean, were you sort of held hostage to that as well?
No, so there's nothing on the farm whatsoever. So I think you get a letter saying, bring your own food and bring your own water. I think there was water taps on the farm to fill up your water bottle, but you had to have a water bottle. And if you don't bring lunch, well, then you're not eating. So yeah, and cooking your own food at the hostel.
And so was the hostel in Bundaberg? So there was like supermarkets or whatever where you could buy food to make dinner for yourself and set yourself up with breakfast?
Yeah, there was a few things around, yeah, which was probably quite handy. And then the farm was, I think, like just a half an hour drive from the hostel, which a bus just takes you.
Right. So it wasn't like you could hunt around for other accommodation. It was like it was all hooked into the one system.
Well, yeah, the hostel is actually like, I think they call it like a working hostel, so they organise the work for you.
Right. So you're pretty much bound to it. So did you stay at the lemon farm for your whole 88 days?
I actually didn't. Towards my, I think my last 3 weeks, I went to a packing shed.
And was that like you just like, okay, I cannot look at another lemon, get me something else, or had the work finished, or what was the story?
Well, it was I actually got offered the packing shed with like more money because a packing shed is actually hourly pay.
Right.
So I think they just needed people on the packing shed, and it goes by like who's been at the farm the longest or like on the waiting list for this. I honestly don't really know how it works, but I just got picked to go to the avocado farm. It was on the like roster the net on the board the next day. Georgina going to the avocado packing shed, and then yeah.
So so you've been gone back to chefing, you've done your 88 days, you're in a whole other, visa category now. How do you look back on that experience?
Ooh. You know what? I am glad I done it, but also I can't. I just want to. There's no way for me to stress like how hard that visa workers work. Like picking, like you said at the start of the podcast, picking the fruit and vegetables that we eat on our plates every day. And I've seen the prices of like lemons in the shops recently, and they're like sky high. But I know they own like Coles, who we actually pick lemons for, and Woolworths, like charging absolutely off the rocket for these lemons. But then the workers are getting paid absolutely pennies. So I don't know, like how is this getting lost in like a middleman, or I just don't understand how we can be exploited so much.
I wonder if that 88 days is some kind of formula where it's like, at 90 days, people start organizing and uprising, and there's a revolution because they just won't stand for it anymore. I mean, the system seems, designed to. You just like you'll get through it. You're out the other side and you just never want to think again. It's just yeah, I just wonder how it's calibrated. Seems calibrated to put people who are able to be exploited in a situation where they are exploited. And I suppose, we do have a food supply chain that in many ways tries to keep the price of food down. And you can say, yeah, that's good. People should be able to afford produce, but they shouldn't be able to afford it because people are being exploited along the way. So it's it's it, it's interesting. Obviously it's bad that there aren't people around to pick the fruit, but if that labor shortage causes us to rethink the way that the industry works, then maybe that is a good thing. It's a rethink that really needs to happen.
Yeah, I was gonna say I absolutely agree. It's definitely something they need to. It's definitely something that needs to be in discussion and definitely like rethinked.
Yeah. Um what would you say to that we've had on the show recently, thankful for farmers who are starting an initiative to get Australian kids who have just left school, they can't do their gap year backpacking around Europe, getting them to go and pick fruit and veg instead. What do you think? Do you think that's going to fly, or do you think that things are going to have to change before Aussie kids do that sort of work?
I think that's such an amazing thing to see as kids, because I was just saying to my partner the other day actually that, you know, nobody gets taught to grow fruit and vegetables at school. Nobody gets taught where food is where food actually comes from. So I think to learn that from a young age is actually so important, and it's such an amazing skill to have, to be able to learn. Like I was saying, we were actually at the beach early, and she was saying, "Oh, I'd love my kid to be able to surf." And I said, "I've always wanted to live on a farm when I'm older." And I said, "Yeah, but..." And she was like, "Oh, yeah, but they won't be able to do that if we live on a farm." And I said, "Yeah, but they're going to have food for life." So I think it is such an important skill, but I mean, like you said, uh, we don't want to see our kids like see, see people getting exploited for also what they eat.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to see anybody get exploited. Like, it's simply not right to bring people from overseas and to send them out of sight, out of mind onto farms simply because they want to stay in Australia. It's like it's just it's just not the way it should be. I mean, when I think about what you're contributing to our restaurant and what you will contribute for decades to come, I just think this is not the kind of welcome mat that we want to throw out for a person like you or for any person. Of course, like you need to work for a living and you need to contribute, but I think um, just it just sounds too shonky, and that the way that the machine is built is leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, um, just you've had quite a bit of experience at different ins and outs of Australia's immigration system. What's your overall impression of the way Australia brings or allows people in from overseas?
Whew. Uh, do you know what? I think it's a good system where they actually do let work, like they do let you come here on a working holiday visa for 1 year, and I think the price I paid for that was £500. So I think $1,000 probably, maybe something a little bit different with the exchange rate now. So, that is a good system. I can come here, work for 6 months in one place, work for 6 months in another place, and then I can do farm work for 3 months to stay another year, or I can do farm work for 6 months to get another year on top of that. But it's and I know there's farm work that is probably a lot easier, and there's definitely farm work that I've heard, like picking bananas, is so much harder than what I've done. So it's kind of like a balance out. Well, if you get lucky, farm work can be such an amazing experience and so much fun for you. Or if you don't get so lucky and there's just not that many jobs at the time, then you are going to end up doing something shit for the next 3 months or 6 months, however long can, you know.
Yeah. So, when you were on the lemon farm, did you actually make any money each week?
Oh, well, I do you know what? I think I probably would have made money if I didn't drink so much on the weekends. But when it was such a new life for me living in a hostel and being around so many like people, whereas in the kitchens I didn't have that such like free environment, where I wasn't doing a job that I loved, and I wasn't pursuing something I didn't want to do. So I didn't really have like a direction for my farm work. I just wanted to get it done and then get back to the kitchen. So I think for that 3 months, I was kind of just maybe just probably very relaxed. So I think throughout the week, I just tried to work as hard, earn some money, and then on the weekend, that was it. Like everyone just wanted to release, I think, and drink in the bar where actually the drinks are probably quite cheap. So honestly, I don't think I saved any money whatsoever, and rent was so expensive, So there was, I think, like I don't know if I mentioned it earlier. There was like a whole week, 8 days. I think it rained. So for that 8 days, like we just didn't have work, and there was just like no money coming in. So you had to be ready for those rainy days as well.
That's really tough. Georgina, tell us what you're doing at the moment at Anchovy. Tell us about the summer that Anchovy set up for itself.
Oh well, so how long has everything been open now? I think, what, almost a month now. Everything's been open. So we was just doing takeaway, and then once that stopped, stopped and everything got reopened, I think we took a week just to decide what we were going to do. And then we'd also set up to do weekends at Sutton Grange Winery. So we would travel up on a Saturday morning and get ready for Saturday and Sunday lunch, doing a tasting menu. Meanwhile, on a Friday, we were still doing banh mi at Anchovy. And then last week was our first Friday night service. I think we did it on our takeaway for a couple of nights and it just popped off. So we're actually serving Viet Cajun broil up. Doing it a little bit different with like Vietnamese flavours in there with like premium seafood, and it's just so good. Like, you get stuck in with a few friends at the table. We can give you gloves if you want, and just cracking into some seafood with a few sides. And yeah, I think that's the approach we've took just at the minute, where we can actually only have a certain amount of people in the dining room because we're a small venue. So I think we're just trying to make the most out of our space for what we can do.
Wow, that sounds so awesome. I reckon that would be great. I'm going to book in.
Oh my God, I
yeah.
asked for the night off. I was like, you don't need me. Can I come in?
Love it. Georgina, it's such a pleasure to catch up with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it's really important to get this this sort of info out there into the community. And yeah, I'm so glad you're in Melbourne. I wish you good Department of Home Affairs luck. May you get a letter soon telling you that your sponsorship's all approved and it's all official.
I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said farm work was so bad, but no, it was good. But yeah, I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, awesome. All right, talk to you soon. See ya. This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.